Let's bring in Sunira Chaudhri, founder and labor lawyer of Workley Law. Sunira, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
What do you make of the timing of this Labor Minister Steve McKinnon's announcement, his move?
Well, it's a bit of a Hail Mary, isn't it? Right before Christmas. I think if we were to go through the holidays without some form of federal government intervention, I think the public sentiment it currently speaks for itself. People are very frustrated. I think going around the dinner table, many folks have been talking about how critical packages, documents have been caught up in the Canada postal strike. And we know that public wants this to pass. So I am not surprised that the federal government thought that they needed to step in before the holidays next week.
But, I mean, this is a little bit of a crystal ball kind of thing. Why do you think he let it go this long? With other strikes that we have seen this year, they've been ended rather quickly. This one, almost a month.
It is long. But if we look back to previous strikes where the government decided to intervene, pass some form of back to work legislation. Usually it's taken a few weeks before the government has gotten involved. I think this is pretty common. Every few years, we've seen some back to work legislation. And normally what we see is government sitting back for a few weeks, waiting to see if the parties can come to a deal on their own before intervening. And so I think the timing of the strike was, of course, very strategic and deliberate. There was a lot of pressure on the government here. And I think most folks will feel potentially like the government came or stepped in a little bit too late. But I think this is actually pretty run-of-the-mill customary for the government to have sat back, waited 2 to 4 weeks, hoping that there was a deal was going to be struck. Unfortunately, it didn't happen here. And they're not letting this ride all the way through into January, which is the right decision. It's the right call.
And now the Labor Relations Board is going to take a look at it. But realistically, these two sides are pretty far apart, aren't they?
It's absolutely an impasse. It's, you know, they're literally and figuratively stuck, and the CIRB is going to step in and order postal workers back to work if it also finds that there's absolutely no room for resolution. But we have to keep in mind here, there is a current collective agreement that's in play until May of 2025. So these workers are not being ordered back with terms being imposed upon them. They're being asked to go back to work under the current terms of their collective agreement. So that's an interesting piece to all of this. It's not as though they're being ordered back without terms. They're going back on the same terms that they agreed to work under until May of 2025.
Now, will this hurt? I'm just wondering if this will hurt the negotiations from the union side. They are off for a month, so that's a lost month of income. Are they going to be angry going back and trying to negotiate now?
There's no question. We heard from the union president. There's strong opposition here. Of course, this does remove power from every union negotiation. If we even go back to the Ontario negotiation or the strike of the LCBO this past summer, I think what we ended up seeing is public sentiment or the public sympathy that we're seeing for striking workers is not nearly as high, I think, provincially and nationally as some would have expected in previous years. It's hard for a lot of workers out there. So when you hear workers looking for 19% wages, more sick days, a lot of private sector workers are not getting those same perks. So you're not seeing the same level of sympathy. And when it comes to revenue, of course, revenue is down. Many small businesses are supremely concerned that they haven't been able to get inventory off their shelves because they haven't been able to use Canada Post for this holiday season when most people are doing the bulk of their annual shopping, right? And so I think the public sympathy all-time low, and I think union workers are going to be going back to work, maybe with not as much leverage as they would have typically had.
And just one last question. I mean, they have until May. Any hopes? Do you think they can negotiate a settlement in that time?
Well, they've appointed Bill Kaplan. I've mediated with Bill Kaplan. I've used him as a mediator in many of my complex cases. If there's a deal to be had, Bill Kaplan can get it. So he absolutely has a gargantuan task on his shoulders, but you need somebody tough that can bring the two parties to the table, especially here when there's a huge impasse, they're too far apart. You need a great mediator to find a creative solution and sometimes to knock some heads together. And I think they've picked, I think McKinnon has picked a great negotiator to do that.
Okay, Sunira, thank you very much for your analysis. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sunira Chaudhri is a founder and labor lawyer at Workley Law.